While the school year has come to an end, a lot has happened recently in the North Carolina General Assembly that will impact how schools operate. Welcome to Education Matters, presented by the Public School Forum of North Carolina. I'm your host for this week, Jennifer Rifkin. This week, we're diving into the newly passed state budget, along with new policies prohibiting diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in North Carolina's schools and universities. We're joined by policy and education experts, Dr. Deanna Townsend-Smith, Senior Director at the Dudley Flood Center, Xavier Adams, educator at Orange High School, Moira Kelly, a recent UNC graduate, Jose Hidalgo, student at Orange High School, Maria Johnson, educator at Rose Hill Magnolia Elementary School, and Dr. Lauren Fox, the Senior Director of Policy and Research at the Public School Forum. Let's start with Dr. Townsend-Smith. Can you give us a little bit of information, the origin, the purpose of Senate Bills 227 and 558?
Yes, thanks for that question, Ms. Rifkin. I think when you talk about the origins of Senate Bill 227 and 558, I think that's a rather, I would say, loaded question, and I think I'll take a little different approach to it here today. I think like at their core, like Senate Bills 227 and 558, they attempt to place new restrictions on how public schools, colleges, and universities approach diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And when we think about diversity is what is represented on the screen here today. We are all different in our own unique ways. Equity for us is talking about making sure that there's opportunity and access for each and everybody. And then inclusion is making sure that everyone feels welcomed as a part of a variety of different initiatives. So these bills, they limit certain programs, they limit training, they limit specific offices that these institutions can have. They also attempt to limit instructional practices related to what they are deeming DEI, while establishing new compliance expectations for educational institutions. And what I've also noticed is that there's a double down effect in this recent budget bill that was passed. These bills, the laws, they are in direct contrast with what the workforce is stating that they need for students who graduate and enter the workforce. When we think about Ms. Kelly, who is here today, who just recently graduated, she's going into a diverse workplace. So when we think about the origin of these bills, which was at the heart of your original question, these bills quite simply are based in this premise of fear and a continued historical resistance to wrestling with truths. And we have to work on continuing to develop empathy, and we can't do that without or even develop a better respect for differences if there's this perception or this actual prohibition on authentic conversations and interactions. The larger question is what kind of educational environment we want to create for North Carolina and how these laws are antithetical to the constitutional mandate of a sound basic education. So there has been this debate that has centered three letters: DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I want to remind us in this state here today, on this show here today, that public education has never been defined by a single acronym. It has been defined by a simple commitment to meeting the needs of each and every child every day. And every day, educators differentiate their instruction to provide interventions, support students with disabilities. They teach English learners. They challenge advanced students, and they create classrooms where all students can learn and thrive. Ultimately, this work shouldn't be political. It's just the essence of public education. And I think our responsibility remains to ensuring that every child has access to excellent education and that every educator has the tools necessary to help students succeed.
Thank you, Dr. Townsend-Smith, for framing the policy and providing a little background. If we could zoom in for others on the show today to share what this might look like in the classroom. How does this law change what happens in classrooms, within student organizations, or on campus day to day?
I think it'll change a lot of what I experience as a student day to day, both in the classroom and on campus, because it threatens some of the student organizations and like teacher-led clubs that we have at our school. And so these clubs create communities of people around our school that I might not be interacting with on a daily basis if I'm not in these clubs. So, firstly, then that'll affect who I'm hanging out with, who I'm talking to about things on campus, and how I'm moving throughout my day. But it'll also threaten some of the things in our classrooms. Like, for example, Mr. Xavier teaches the AP African American Studies class at our school. And as well as some friends, took that class. And I believe it's really important to learn about different times of equity and inclusion, and classes like that being threatened by these laws are super important to us as students, but also to the school as a whole.
So Jose is touching on impact to school community and perhaps even specific classes that are being taught at his high school. Moira, would you add anything, or Mr. Xavier?
I can definitely jump in. I think we're already seeing it in classrooms on the university level. I know professors are a lot more cautious to talk about certain topics that might be considered controversial, especially if they can be interpreted as violating the law. Also, on top of that, UNC administration can legally record professors without their knowledge. So there is a concern around that as well in terms of that. We're also seeing changes in initiatives offered on campus, whether it's like orientation or mentorship programs, kind of like Jose mentioned, that target specific student populations or just general student support services. And in terms of clubs, it does limit institutional resources, whether it's funding opportunities from the university or support for programming around different topics. Also, UNC is a really big research institution, and it does affect a lot of the different administrative barriers around research and what research is supported. I know UNC proposed closing 6 area study centers. I was a global studies major, so that's kind of close to my heart. These centers provide resources to students and faculties like scholarships and grants for research or organize public lectures and workshops. But even without explicitly prohibiting research on these specific topics, it may cause scholars to be more hesitant to study certain topics, or even if they want to, they may not be able to because of funding concerns or access. I know that there have been issues for people researching public health and health equity and receiving funding, or even being able to continue their research.
Mr. Xavier, the law identifies 12 divisive concepts. We've sort of been touching on how those might impact schools and universities, but these are concepts that may absolutely not be promoted. One such concept is written: any individual solely by virtue of his or her race or sex should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress. As an educator, how do you interpret this language, and how, if at all, will it impact how or what you teach?
For context, at my school, I teach African American Studies, Latin American Studies, and also World History. And I think our first impulse is to think about the cultural studies classes that I teach, and we think about how this might impact how those particular courses are taught or how an American history course is taught. But really, I'd like to talk about it from the context of my world history class. In my world history class, we learn about very terrible modern events, for instance, the Holocaust. And with learning about the Holocaust, I think the reality is we understand it's important to learn about. We understand that if we don't learn about it, this theme, this mantra that people say of never again wanting to see the Holocaust happen, if we don't study it, unfortunately, we will continue to see themes of anti-Semitism taking place in modern society. With that being said, I also don't think that anyone has ever stopped and said, students of German descent might feel particularly picked on in these dialogues around anti-Semitism, around these histories of learning about the Holocaust. And I think the reality is really good teachers, which we're fortunate in North Carolina. We have really equipped, great teachers across the state. These thoughtful teachers are talking about topics like the Holocaust, talking about topics like Black history, topics like Latin American history, and they're telling the full story, which means that every person can feel dignified when learning these histories, right? When we talk about the history of the Holocaust, when I talk about it, we're not just learning about, you know, the German folks who were a part of the Nazi regime. We're also talking about who were the compassionate and empathetic German citizens who harbored Jewish folks in their homes and helped them escape and helped them find a sense of refuge amidst this terrible regime that they were experiencing. When we talk about the history of the Holocaust, we're not just talking about Jewish folks who, you know, were victims of a terrible oppression. We also talk about their bravery and their resiliency and their effort to continue to live a life of dignity and of passion and of religious commitment. And throughout all of these atrocities, right, we see that there's so many different actors on one side. And I think the unfortunate reality is that this law falsely creates a narrative that flattens these histories, that reduces people to one side or the other. And I think the beauty of learning history in any context, whether it's world history, Latin American studies, or African American studies, is that all students can find someone that they relate to and they can look up to as a hero, whether that person is from their own cultural group or from another cultural group. There's a lot of great people in history that we can learn from.
And these laws perhaps will impact how we frame the history that you teach in your classes. And so I just want to thank all of you for your perspectives and for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and we'll be keeping an eye on these two bills very closely. After the break, we'll dive into the newly passed North Carolina budget. Dr. Fox, take us back in time a little. When was the last time we had a new budget, and what's been the holdup in passing one?
Yeah, so the last time we had a comprehensive state budget passed was in 2023. So it's been more than 1,000 days since that happened, and we should have had a full budget passed in 2025 because that was our legislative long session when that work is supposed to happen. We did not have a budget passed last year, mainly because of disagreements between the House and the Senate on a few key pieces. And just, for clarity's sake, both the House and the Senate in North Carolina are led by Republican leadership. And then, of course, our governor is a Democrat. So it was really more between the chambers than between political parties, these disagreements. And the two most sort of the largest issues that were at the root of this were tax cuts. The Senate side wanted to deepen and speed up the rate at which we're cutting personal income taxes in North Carolina. The House did not. They wanted to slow things down a bit because of concerns over whether we'll have enough revenue in the future to continue to fund critical infrastructure that we fund at the state level. The other key piece was teacher pay. The House proposed and was very close to the governor on what they were looking for teacher pay. They were looking for much higher raises than what the Senate side wanted to pass. So those were the two things that really kept us from getting over the hump last year.
So a year late, Maria, what is the impact of this budget passing so late in the biennium? And what have students and educators experienced as we've all been waiting for this?
Waiting on the budget, it puts a lot of strain when you don't have an updated budget to that satisfies the needs or the increases that you have, through each year. Looking at some budgets, they're you don't have the monies to hire additional help. You don't have the monies to buy the supplies that you need. And when I say supplies, not just your paper, pencil, stuff like that, your books, the books needed, the materials for the curriculums, the teacher enhancements, the professional developments. They're all limited, or they take into your planning time, and you're giving up planning time to actually plan for your students to do some of these professional developments. So the weight on a budget, you're glad to see it finally come, but there's still some, it's like, okay, thank you for finally giving us something, but we need more. And it's not like trying to be greedy, it's knowing that we are behind in the needs, in the funds for the needs, because our needs are growing every year. We have highly populated areas where your English language learners, you don't have the sufficiency, the staff to actually, you know, help the students that need the help the most. You can't hire, you don't have the monies to hire your special needs. I'm sitting in a classroom of 25 and my highly need special ed student has to sit there to just be exposed instead of receiving the help that he needs, because the one teacher that we have has so many that she cannot pull him the amount of time that he actually needs. I mean, so finally getting something, but is it enough is the question. Is it the right? Have we done the right by the students, by what we have passed? Is it going to actually help increase our students' knowledge and the help that they need?
Yeah, certainly trying to understand whether what was proposed will be sufficient, especially as you just expressed, like a year of many missed opportunities to meet the needs of your students. Dr. Fox, speaking of staffing shortages and concerns, what's in the budget regarding educator pay as well as for non-certified staff?
Yeah, this has been an area where we've spent a lot of time and energy. Teachers saw no pay increases, of course, last year because there was no budget. So there is an average raise across the board for teachers of about 8%. It's important to know that that's heavily weighted towards our earlier career teachers. So the budget brings our starting salary for beginning teachers to $48,000 per year. Previously, it was $41,000. So that's a big step in the right direction. But then our more veteran teachers with, say, 15 plus years of experience are seeing smaller increases. And really the increases that they're receiving are not even at the level of keeping up with inflation. And so I think that that really puts some of our more experienced teachers in a bind. For non-certified staff across the board, as well as principals, there's a 3% increase in salary. There are some bonuses both for teachers and for non-certified staff. Cafeteria or custodial employees, and school nutrition workers will receive a bonus of $1,750. And teachers will receive a bit more of a bonus as well, depending on their years of experience. But of course, it's a one-time bonus. It's not a long-term investment in those roles.
So Maria, how will these salary increases affect you or other veteran teachers? As Dr. Fox just explained, that the increase is pretty insignificant when we look at things like rising healthcare costs and cost of living in general. Do you think these raises will help to address teacher recruitment and retention challenges that we've been seeing?
While I appreciate, the state's investment in recruiting new teachers, because we do, my question is whether we are investing in enough in retaining the experienced teachers who are already producing the student results that we need. Yes, get the teachers in there. We need those teachers, but there's money that goes into the investment of training the teachers, building the teachers, and then helping them find their way to sustain them. But what are we doing to keep the teachers who are there? I mean, if salary schedules and incentives focus primarily on recruitment, experienced teachers, they'll start, we start to ask whether our expertise is valued. We're helping. The veteran teachers are your ones who are sticking through the thick and the thin with you, so to speak. You've been there when there's no budget, and this is not, when the budget has not, they haven't increased the budget or they didn't present a new budget. We've been there, when it's everything that is changes, curriculum changes over and over. And then as the student population changes, their veteran teachers have been there. We've learned what has worked, what doesn't work, what misconceptions students may have. When we don't, as we notice in past, many teachers have been walking out. Teachers with experience have been leaving the profession, so to speak. But when they leave, the experience goes with it. Who is to help the new teachers? And if we look at right now, our new teachers, there's a big turnaround, a high turnover rate with our new teachers. They're not staying, some of them. Okay, money is an incentive to get them in there, but what is the incentive to keep them there, to keep teachers there? That's the question. So when roughly average myself, I will have hit the 16-year mark now, and your pay doesn't change from 15 to 24. You keep the same, and that's been the same for a while now. Once you plateau for a while, and that is not a big incentive for some to stay in the teaching field. That's what I would like for policymakers to address. How do we keep our veteran teachers? How do we keep the experience within the school system, within the public school system?
Yeah, and we know how critical veteran teachers are for mentorship and institutional knowledge and just building and sustaining that school community. After the break, this week's final word. North Carolina's economy depends on public investments that help people work, learn, care for their families, and participate fully in their communities. Our 2026 budget is more than just a spending agreement for the fiscal year. We must ask ourselves, does the vision for North Carolina's future presented in this budget align with the future that we envision for our children? Will the tax cuts providing short-term benefits for some be worth the limits they place on our state's ability to prepare for growth and respond to crisis for all? While the budget provides some meaningful and much-needed investments, existing and pending tax policy changes put the future of our public school students at risk. Realizing a future where students learn together, communities are invested in their local public schools, and all kids and communities have the opportunity to thrive will require sustained, long-term and systemic investments and commitment from lawmakers. To learn more about what's in the newly passed North Carolina budget, visit ncforum.org/education matters. Thank you for taking time with us to learn and think about education. That's all for today, and we'll see you next week.